My wife cheated on me with our 17-year-old gardener. I never imagined I'd be the kind of man who would pour his life onto an anonymous forum, but something about anonymity feels safer than the silence of my own house. Maybe strangers can see what I can't. Maybe they can tell me which choice hurts less in the long run. My name is Steve. I'm 34 years old, a corporate office worker with a predictable routine and a badge that beeps me into a building made of glass, steel, and quiet competition. My days are filled with meetings that blur together, coffee that tastes burnt no matter where I get it, and a constant pressure to be useful. I always thought I understood exhaustion, until this year taught me a new definition. My wife, Angela, is a housewife. We've been together for 5 years. Not perfect years, but stable ones. The kind of relationship people describe as solid. We met before life hardened us, married when we still believed love was enough to carry anything. For the most part, it was. The only thing we never had was children. That was my fault, or at least my body's. I still remember the doctor's voice, neutral and careful, explaining infertility like it was a technical malfunction. I remember Angela squeezing my hand afterward and telling me it didn't change how she felt. She cried that night, but she told me it wasn't because of me. I chose to believe her. We talked about adoption, about focusing on each other, about building a life that didn't revolve around something we couldn't have. I thought we had accepted it. So when Angela told me she was pregnant, the world tilted. She stood in the kitchen, sunlight coming through the window, holding a pregnancy test like it was sacred. Her eyes were red. Her smile trembled. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I reminded her, gently, of what the doctors had said. She nodded and said she knew. Then she whispered, "But sometimes miracles happen." I wanted to be grateful. I wanted to feel joy without fear. And for a while I did. I let myself imagine a future I had buried. I went to work distracted, smiling for no reason. I caught myself looking at strollers when I walked past store windows. I thought maybe life was finally giving something back. But miracles don't come with secrets. The first signs were subtle. Angela became oddly guarded about details. She avoided discussing timelines. She insisted on attending appointments alone, saying she needed space to process everything. She started correcting me when I mentioned dates, like she was afraid I'd accidentally notice something she didn't want to explain. Then there was her phone. She never used to hide it. Now it was always face down, always locked. Notifications silenced. If I walked into a room unexpectedly, her hand would twitch, small, almost unconscious. But it happened every time. She'd smile afterward, too quickly, and ask if I needed anything. She also changed how she treated me. She became excessively affectionate, overly attentive. She cooked my favorite meals more often, asked about my work in details she'd never cared about before, touched my arm when she walked past like she needed reassurance that I was still there. At first, I told myself it was the pregnancy, hormones, nesting, anything but the truth. And then there was Joe. Joe was our gardener, 17 years old, quiet, polite, always respectful when he spoke to me. He'd been coming by for months before any of this started. I barely noticed him, just a kid with work gloves and dirt-stained shoes. But Angela noticed him. She started making sure she was home when he came. She dressed differently on those days. Nothing extreme, just enough to register once I started paying attention. She laughed more when he was around. Once I came home early and found them talking in the backyard. There was nothing clearly wrong about it, but the way Angela startled when she saw me made my stomach tighten. Joe couldn't meet my eyes. I told myself I was paranoid. The night everything collapsed was quiet. Too quiet. Angela was in the shower. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once, then again. I didn't plan to look. I swear that. But the screen lit up with a name that didn't belong in our bedroom. Joe. The message preview was short. "Did you tell him?" That question echoed in my head long after the screen went dark. When Angela came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, humming softly, I felt detached from my own body. We sat at the kitchen table hours later, the sky still black outside, and I asked her directly. No accusations, just one question. She collapsed. She cried so hard she could barely speak. She told me it started with conversations, that she felt lonely, that she didn't plan for it to happen, that she never thought she'd get pregnant. Every sentence felt rehearsed, like she'd been preparing for this moment without knowing when it would come. Then she told me Joe was 17. That was when the room felt unreal. The baby wasn't mine. That if anyone found out, her life would be over. She said she could go to jail. She said the baby needed stability. She said I was the only one who could protect them. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I just listened, feeling something heavy settle inside my chest. Now I lie awake every night next to a woman I don't recognize, weighing silence against truth. I don't know if I'm capable of pretending this child is mine. I don't know if I can live with destroying everything either. I never asked to be part of this story, but now it's all I am. So I'm here, asking strangers for advice. Because right now, I don't trust myself to know what the right thing is anymore. What would you do? Story 2. I found out my wife was cheating on me on my birthday. Birthdays are strange things. Some people treat them like milestones, others like warning signs. For me, my birthday has always been a quiet marker in the year. Nothing extravagant, nothing dramatic. Just a dinner with my wife Maya, maybe a walk afterward, maybe a movie at home with a slice of cake. That had always been enough. But this year was different from the very first moment I opened my eyes. I should have recognized it from the tone of Maya's voice. She sounded too excited, too cheerful in a way that didn't quite match the previous few weeks. "Happy birthday," she said, appearing in the doorway of our bedroom with a bright pink gift bag. "I thought I'd give this to you before you go to work." She leaned in to kiss me and I caught it again, the unfamiliar cologne. Sharp, musky, not mine. I didn't say anything. I didn't accuse her or ask a question. I simply kissed her back, took the bag, and thanked her. I had always been that kind of man, patient, calm, slow to assume the worst. If only the gift inside the bag had been as considerate. The box was small, black velvet, heavier than I expected. "Go on," Maya urged, bouncing slightly with anticipation. "Open it." Inside the box was a pair of cufflinks, beautiful ones, silver, modern, engraved with a pair of sleek, intertwined initials. Except they weren't mine. The engraving read DH. I blinked, then held one of the cufflinks up to the light, as if maybe the swirl of the letters was tricking me. No, there was no mistaking them. DH. My name is Oliver Hayes. OH. There was no universe in which these letters were intended for me. "Oh," Maya said suddenly. Her face changed, only for a second, before she forced a smile. "Hang on, let me see that." She reached quickly, almost too quickly, and I gently kept my grip on the box. Her fingers brushed mine, warm and tense. "Did something happen with the order?" I asked. My voice stayed steady, neutral. "Looks like they engraved the wrong initials." Maya looked at the cufflinks again, then at me, then at the door as if someone might walk in and rescue her from the moment. I I may have grabbed the wrong bag this morning," she said. "I need to check something." Her tone was hurried, layered with something I couldn't quite read. She slipped the box out of my hand with a soft but firm motion. "I'll fix it," she added quickly. "Don't worry." And with that, she disappeared into the hallway. I sat there for a long moment, heartbeat slow but heavy, staring at the empty space where the gift had been. The gift was wrong. The initials were wrong. And somehow the explanation felt even more wrong than everything else. But this wasn't the first sign. Not even close. If I were to be honest with myself, and I pride myself on honesty, I'd admit the oddities began months earlier. Small things at first. Maya had always been a fairly predictable person, in the best possible way. She liked routines. She liked finishing her work before bringing any stress home. She liked turning off her phone during dinner and talking about our day. But recently, she had changed. She'd started working late more often, too often to match the usual pace of her department, which had been slow these past few months. She was glued to her phone, not in a playful way like teenagers or bored commuters, but with a protective intensity, as if the contents might combust if she didn't watch them closely enough. On top of that, I'd smelled cologne on her clothes a few times. Not mine. A heavier scent, bolder, richer. And then there were the receipts. One night, I found a folded piece of paper in her jeans pocket while doing laundry. It was from a restaurant we'd been to once several years ago on our anniversary. A romantic place, dim lights, live jazz, excellent seafood. The receipt was for 2 meals, 2 drinks, 2 desserts. I'd asked her about it, gently, and she'd said it was a team dinner from work. Someone else picked the place, she'd said a bit too fast. I just went along. I believed her, or rather, I wanted to believe her. And then there were the little things. The smile she'd hide when her phone lit up. The phone calls she took on the balcony in the cold. The way she now angled her phone away from me whenever she typed. Still, I never confronted her. I never made accusations. I've always believed people reveal the truth eventually, one way or another. I just didn't expect the truth to fall into my lap on my birthday morning, disguised as a gift. After Maya rushed off with the cufflinks, she returned minutes later, smiling too broadly. Everything's fine, just a mix-up, she said. I'll take care of it after work. Promise. She kissed my cheek, handed me my coffee, and hurried to get ready. But that uneasy feeling stayed with me, like a quiet warning bell ringing somewhere in the background. The day itself was normal, on the surface. I went to work, answered emails, attended meetings, nodded through discussions that didn't need me as much as people assumed. At lunch, my phone buzzed. Boutique Étoile. Reminder, pickup for Mr. DH is ready. We will hold the item until 7 p.m. Thank you. The text arrived on my wife's contact number. Maya had forwarded her personal calls and messages to our shared phone plan, but a boutique texting me about a pickup for Mr. DH made no sense. Unless the cufflinks weren't the only item intended for someone else. I stared at the message for a long time, letting the letters settle into place. DH, there it was again. Then 2 hours later, another message arrived, this time an email. Your reservation for 2 Heart, Daniel birthday, celebration 7:30 p.m. La Vela Marina. My pulse didn't speed up. It didn't skip. It didn't crash. It simply steadied. The pieces were falling into place. Maya had plans, real plans, detailed plans. The only question was whether she still intended to celebrate my birthday, our tradition, or whether today had been reassigned to someone else entirely. That evening, Maya came home earlier than usual, cheerful and oddly nervous at the same time. I have a surprise for you later tonight, she said, hugging me tightly. But we need to leave at 8. Dress nicely, okay? 8. Not 7:30, not the time in the email. She was planning something else entirely. I should take a quick shower, she said, heading to the bathroom. The moment the water started running, I walked to the kitchen counter where the gift bag still sat. She'd put it there, neatly, too neatly, as if she wanted to forget about it entirely. I reached inside and felt the soft fabric lining of the bag. It was empty, except for something wedged into the very bottom. A receipt. I pulled it out carefully. Cufflinks custom engraving. DH purchase last Friday. Pickup date, July 21st. Friday. The same Friday she said she had to work late because of an urgent project. I stood there quietly for a moment, letting the final confirmation settle. She had bought a birthday gift for a man with the initials DH. She had made dinner reservations for him. She had a boutique pickup for him. And she had planned an evening out, on my birthday. I wasn't angry, just disappointed, and strangely calm. If anger is fire, disappointment is ice. When the time came to leave, Maya appeared in the hallway wearing a dress I hadn't seen in years. It was elegant, with a soft sheen, the kind of dress she'd once reserved for important moments in our marriage. Ready? She asked, adjusting her earrings. Yes, I said, grabbing my keys. She climbed into the passenger seat while I took the driver's side. The place we're going is new, she said lightly. I think you'll like it. I nodded, started the car, and drove, not toward the new place she mentioned, but toward the restaurant from the email, La Vela Marina. Her reaction was immediate. Oh, I didn't think we were going this way, she stammered. My surprise is at a different restaurant, Oliver. I know, I replied quietly, but I have a feeling we should stop here first. She shifted uncomfortably. Why? We have a reservation elsewhere. Do we? I asked calmly. Silence filled the car. Maya, I said softly, I got an email today about a reservation for Daniel. She froze. Her fingers tightened around her purse. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. I didn't respond. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the soft click of the turning signal as I parked in front of the restaurant. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words emerged. We walked toward the entrance together, slowly, heavily. The host saw us approach and lit up instantly. Welcome, Ms. Hart. Your table is ready. Will Mr. Hart be joining you shortly? Maya inhaled sharply. The host smiled politely, oblivious to the impact of her words. Ms. Hart, her maiden name, a name she hadn't used in years, used only for private reservations, for private relationships, for private celebrations. Right this way, the host said, guiding us inside. The table was beautifully set. 2 champagne flutes, a small, elegantly wrapped box, a bottle of wine, a chocolate cake with gold lettering that read, Happy Birthday, Daniel. The candlelight flickered gently across the polished tablecloth. For a moment, I simply stared. Not at the cake, not at the gift, at the 2 chairs. One meant for her, one meant for him, and none meant for me, not even on my own birthday. Maya swallowed hard. I can explain, but then, as if the universe wanted to remove the last shred of ambiguity, someone appeared behind us. A tall man, clean-cut, wearing a flawless navy suit, the exact suit mentioned in the boutique text message earlier. His eyes landed on us, on Maya, on me, and in an instant, the truth was laid bare without anyone needing to speak. Daniel, Maya whispered. Her voice was thin, fragile. Daniel Hart stopped in his tracks, his face drained of color. He looked at Maya with something like guilt, and at me with something like fear. He opened his mouth, closed it, took a step back. I'm sorry, he muttered, eyes downcast. And with that, he turned around and walked out of the restaurant. No dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no accusations. Just departure. Perhaps he was a man like me, quiet, reserved, unwilling to create a scene, or perhaps he simply knew that nothing he could say would make a difference. Maya stood there trembling. I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were glossy, her hands shook, her breath came unevenly. Oliver, she whispered, please, let me explain. I nodded once. Go ahead. But the words never came. She opened her mouth and closed it again, her eyes filled with tears she didn't wipe away. I waited, patient, calm. Finally, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I know, I replied gently. Let's go home. We drove back in silence. No one raised their voice. No one blamed the other. Sometimes silence carries more weight than any argument ever could. When we got home, I walked to our bedroom, removed my wedding ring, and placed it carefully on the table beside the cufflinks she bought for another man. She watched from the doorway, shaking. What happens now? She asked softly. I turned to her, the calmness of the entire evening settling even deeper in my bones. Now, I said, we stop pretending. Her face crumpled. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. I nodded. People rarely do. She hesitated for a long time. Then she whispered, Do you hate me? No, I said honestly. I don't hate you, but I can't unknow what happened today. I handed her the gift bag. This, I said quietly, was never meant for me, and now I understand. Neither was the rest. She broke down then, softly, quietly, without words. But tears don't rewrite history. I walked past her, opened the hall closet, and took out her suitcase. I'll sleep on the couch tonight, I said simply. She didn't fight me, didn't argue, didn't try to rewrite anything anymore. The truth was finally too big to hide. After she went to the guest room, I poured myself a small glass of water and sat on the couch in the dark. The night was quiet, still, almost peaceful. It was my birthday. And yet every detail of her day, all her planning, her excitement, her secrecy, belonged to someone else. A different celebration, a different man, a different future she had crafted privately. She hadn't simply forgotten my birthday, she had overwritten it. I sat there, letting that realization settle like dust in an empty house. And slowly, calmly, without anger or drama, the truth formed fully in my mind. It was my birthday, but everything she prepared was for another man. And nothing reveals more about a marriage than who the celebration is truly meant for. Story 3. I had never felt more alive and more dead at the same time. It started with a letter, a crisp envelope, official looking, postmarked from an insurance company I had never dealt with. The first line made my hands tremble. We regret to inform you that a life insurance policy under the name of Jared Williams has been claimed. I blinked, then blinked again. My pulse slowed, then raced. Claimed. I was sitting at my kitchen table, coffee cooling, staring at the envelope. The words seemed absurd, impossible. I am very much alive. And yet, according to this letter, my death had been reported, or at least someone had tried to claim it. I felt a chill run down my spine, my mind racing. Then the impossible truth sank in. The policy was taken out by my wife, Claire, for someone else. I hadn't yet realized that this letter would unravel everything I thought I knew about our marriage. Claire and I had been married 12 years. On paper, a comfortable life, a cozy home in the suburbs, predictable routines, a marriage that many friends envied for its stability. But over the past 6 months, little things had started to feel off. The first clue was financial. Claire had always managed our accounts carefully, but recently I noticed small anomalies. Larger withdrawals than necessary, mysterious receipts in her handwriting. She called them bills for work-related things or payments for friends' emergencies. I had accepted her explanation. I wanted to believe her. Then came the unusual absences. She told me she had meetings late into the night, often, phone calls she took behind closed doors, emails that made her flinch whenever I walked into the room. I chalked it up to stress. She's a private person, I reasoned. Maybe she was just managing her work more intensively. I had no reason to suspect anything worse. Not yet. And then came the letter. After the initial shock of the insurance letter, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I called the insurance company to verify the details. The policy existed. My name, my date of birth. Correct. The beneficiary, however, was someone I did not know. Initials ML. The sum was astronomical. Enough to pay off our mortgage, fund a small business, and still leave a life-changing amount in the bank. I read the letter again, slowly, line by line. Then I read it again. The truth hit me. Someone, apparently my wife, had taken out a life insurance policy in my name to benefit another person if something happened to me. I sat in silence for hours, the coffee long gone cold. Later that night, Claire came home from work, cheerful as always. I watched her. Every movement, every tone of voice, every word suddenly felt suspect. "Dinner's ready," she said. Her smile was familiar, but the warmth I remembered seemed forced. I nodded silently, ate, listened to the clink of cutlery on plates. Then I asked casually, "Claire, do you have life insurance policies for me?" Her fork froze midair. A small, imperceptible twitch crossed her face. I I don't think so. Why?" she asked, trying to maintain calm. "Oh, just curious. Heard something at work." I kept my voice steady, neutral. She didn't press further. She set her fork down, glanced at the tablecloth pattern, then said, "I'll check, okay?" And she did. She went into the study. I stayed in the kitchen. I didn't need to follow her. The evidence would reveal itself soon enough. I started small. First, I reviewed our financial records. Large withdrawals, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Some were minor, some substantial, all traced back to Claire. Then I checked emails she had left open on her laptop, unprotected. I know it's not noble, but I had to know. There it was, a trail of emails between Claire and someone named Michael L. ML, the same initials as the policy beneficiary. Some emails were mundane, meeting times, lunch plans. Others, more personal. "Don't worry, everything is going according to plan," one read. Another, "The policy is finalized. The beneficiary will get the funds if everything happens as discussed. My stomach dropped. Everything. Plan, beneficiary, death. I felt the floor shift beneath me, even as I sat at our polished wooden desk. She had been planning for me not to be there. I didn't act immediately. I wanted more proof, certainty. I began tracking patterns, where she went during work meetings, who she called late at night. Then one evening, I found receipts from a hotel, a luxury suite paid in cash. Dates coincided with nights she claimed to work late. I stayed calm. I told myself calm, rational, deliberate. Finally, a week later, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. She had left her phone on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. I couldn't resist. I opened her messages. There it was, an email draft, not yet sent. Everything is ready. The policy is in place. Tonight we celebrate with a toast to our future. The words stared back at me. Her affair, the life insurance, the plan, it was all laid bare. I did not shout. I did not cry. I did not break anything. I simply waited. That evening, Claire returned, dressed for dinner. I thought we could go out, she said. Just the two of us. Celebrate, you know? I nodded, played along. My voice is calm even. We drove in silence, her glancing nervously at me from time to time. Jared, everything okay? She finally asked. Perfect, I said softly. We arrived at a small upscale restaurant. As we walked in, the maitre d' greeted Claire warmly. Ms. Williams, your table for two is ready. Mr. L will join you shortly. Her face paled. It's just a misunderstanding, she stammered. I didn't say anything. I simply watched. A man entered, tall, confident. He looked at Claire. She blushed almost imperceptibly. Then she turned to me. He was Michael L. The truth hit with quiet precision. She had been living a double life, an affair, a plan, a life insurance policy taken out in my name to financially benefit him if I disappeared. All those small absences, the mysterious receipts, the late-night emails, they were pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to assemble. Now the picture's complete. I stayed composed. I didn't shout. I didn't demand explanations. Claire tried, hesitated, then finally whispered, Jared, I don't, I said quietly. I know. I turned and walked out. No scene, no drama. I left her standing there with Michael L. and the evidence of her betrayal. Back in the car, I sat in silence. The hum of the engine, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the seat, everything reminding me of trust broken. I drove home. At home, I poured a glass of water, sat in the dark living room, and stared at the life insurance letter. A curious, cruel irony filled me. The person you trust most in the world could plan your absence, could financially benefit from your disappearance, could create a parallel life that exists quietly alongside your own, and yet here I was, alive, observing the truth with clear eyes. I didn't know what the future held. Divorce, separation, maybe reconciliation? Perhaps I would be left alone entirely. But one thing was certain, nothing in my life would ever feel the same again. The double life had been exposed, and while it hadn't destroyed me physically, it had changed the landscape of my trust, my marriage, and my sense of reality forever. I finished my water, placed the envelope in a drawer, closed it, and in the silence I realized something that no betrayal can ever erase. The truth has a clarity that nothing else can provide. Claire had planned for me to disappear, and yet I was still here, alive, awake, clear-eyed. Story 4. I followed my wife to the book club and found him. It started with a text message from our neighbor, Marcy. Saw Miranda at the book club with someone else. You should know. I read it twice, thinking maybe my eyes had misread the words. But no, there it was, black on white, and something in me shifted. Book club. Miranda had been telling me about her new book club for months. She spoke about it with enthusiasm. The characters, the plot twists, the discussions with other members. She said it was her hobby, a way to connect with her love of literature. and now apparently it wasn't. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. My stomach knotted. Who was she really meeting? And why hadn't she mentioned him to me? I tried to breathe calmly. I wanted answers. But I knew that whatever I was about to discover would change everything. Miranda had always been someone who appreciated words. Even before the book club, she had shelves filled with novels, memoirs, and poetry. We had spent countless evenings discussing authors we loved, quoting lines from stories that resonated with us. When she told me she wanted to join a local book club, I was genuinely happy for her. A hobby, she said, to enrich her mind, meet new people, and maybe inspire our own conversations at home. At first it was harmless. She would tell me about the books she was reading. "We're discussing The Great Gatsby tonight," she said, with a spark in her eyes. I love analyzing the characters' motivations. I believed her. I wanted to. Then came the small oddities. She started leaving early for her club meetings, sometimes with no explanation of the time. She came home smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume, the scent sweet and woody, something I had never worn. Receipts appeared in our shared accounts, cafes I had never been to, boutique restaurants, small gifts that made no sense in the context of a book club. I didn't confront her, not immediately. I told myself she had new friends, new experiences. Perhaps she deserved a little space. Over time, the oddities became patterns. I noticed that the book club meetings often coincided with dinner invitations I had made that she declined at the last minute. Weekend plans I suggested seemed to evaporate as soon as her club schedule appeared. Curiosity turned into suspicion, and suspicion turned into quiet investigation. I asked once if I could attend a meeting. "I'd love to see what it's like," I said casually. Her expression changed subtly, not in anger, not in fear, but in a way that made my chest tighten. "Oh, it's really just a small group of women from the neighborhood," she said, "not really suitable for guests." I accepted that explanation, or at least I tried to. But the unease stayed. Then one evening I saw something on social media that made my heart lurch. A photo, Miranda sitting in a cozy cafe, laughing. Next to her, a man I didn't recognize. They were leaning in close, drinks in hand. Their expressions were warm, intimate, casual in a way that suggested a deep familiarity. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to reconcile the image with the woman I thought I knew. I began paying attention to subtle patterns, locations, cafes, boutique restaurants, small art galleries, all places Miranda claimed were book club venues. Messages. I noticed emojis, inside jokes, casual flirty language in messages she thought she deleted. Timing. Meetings always happened when I was busy with work or out running errands. I didn't confront her. I wanted certainty. I needed proof. Then one Thursday evening, an opportunity presented itself. Miranda had left her phone charging on the kitchen counter. She had gone to shower, thinking I was occupied with work emails. I glanced at the notifications, a half-written message to D. "Can't wait for tonight. I'll bring the notes, but maybe we'll discuss other things." Other things. I felt my stomach twist. I checked further, cautiously, ensuring she couldn't see me. Emails, messages, even calendar entries, all pointing to the same truth. There was no book discussion. The book club didn't exist in the way she described. It was a cover, a front for someone else. I decided to follow her discreetly one evening. She left our home carrying a small tote bag and wearing a scarf I didn't recognize. Her car took the longer route, one that passed through the city center, instead of the neighborhood hall she claimed to meet at. I followed at a safe distance. She stopped at a small, warmly lit cafe, and there he was, Daniel, a man tall and composed with an easy smile. They greeted each other warmly, leaning close, laughing as if no one else existed in the world. No books, no discussion, no literature. They ordered drinks, sat in a quiet corner, and talked in low, intimate voices. I watched, my heart heavy, but my mind clear. The betrayal was undeniable. Receipts confirmed their meetings over weeks. Breakfasts, late dinners, coffee dates. Each outing meticulously recorded, each conversation secretly cherished, all while I was oblivious. I didn't approach immediately. I wanted to remain calm. When Miranda returned home that night, I greeted her as usual. "Dinner's ready," she said, her tone light, as if nothing were amiss. I nodded, ate in silence. Later, as we settled in the living room, I spoke softly. "Miranda, the book club. Can we talk about it?" She paused, sensing the weight in my voice. "Yeah, of course," she said cautiously. I turned to her, eyes steady. I know about Daniel, about the club, about the cafes, the dinners, the secret meetings." Her lips parted slightly. For a moment there was disbelief, then panic. "I, it's not what you think," she whispered. I didn't interrupt. I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to see that the evidence spoke louder than any excuses. "I followed you," I said quietly. "I saw everything. The cafes, the dinners, the laughter, the notes, the messages." She sank into the sofa, her hands trembling. I didn't mean—" "I know," I said calmly. "I know." No shouting, no tears from me. Just quiet. Clarity. I spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling. The book club, the thing she claimed was a hobby, a passion, was a facade, a carefully constructed cover for months of deceit. I thought of the irony. A place meant for the exploration of imagination, characters and stories had become a stage for betrayal. The most ordinary routines, cafes, books, meetings, were the instruments of deception. I realized then that life often hides the extraordinary in plain sight. You see a book, a cafe, a hobby, and think it's innocent. And yet beneath it, there can be a life you never imagined, a secret carefully guarded. I did not rage. I did not yell. I did not demand explanations I already knew. I simply acknowledged the truth. Miranda had betrayed me. She had hidden a parallel life behind the guise of a hobby we both valued. And in that quiet, I understood that this knowledge, painful as it was, gave me clarity I had never had before. I was no longer blind to the duplicity in my own home. The next morning, Miranda sat across from me at the breakfast table, looking tired, apprehensive. I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't need to say anything," as I replied. Calm, measured, clear. "The truth speaks for itself." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. She tried to reach for my hand. I didn't stop her. I didn't respond. I let her gestures exist without reaction. The book club was over. Not just the fictional one, but the life she had been hiding. I poured myself coffee, looked out the window, and thought about the strange ways deception grows in everyday life. How ordinary routines, innocent hobbies, and small secrets can hide extraordinary betrayals. And I resolved to move forward, quietly, calmly, with my eyes wide open. The story of the book club with no books had ended. The betrayal had been revealed, and I was still here, observing, learning, and surviving. Story 5. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who ends up quietly tracking his wife's car through a city we've both lived in for more than a decade. If you asked anyone who knows me, they'd tell you I'm calm, measured, maybe even slow to react sometimes. I don't jump to conclusions, I don't throw accusations, and I don't raise my voice. But that's probably why this whole thing played out the way it did. Quietly, almost gently, like a book I didn't want to keep reading, but couldn't put down either. It all started on an ordinary Thursday evening, the kind of day you forget as soon as it ends, unless something comes along and brands it into your memory forever. That night, my phone buzzed with an alert from the car tracking app we both used. We installed it years ago when she first got her new car, more for convenience than anything else. Finding the car in big mall parking lots, tracking mileage for insurance, stuff like that. The alert said her car was parked downtown near a business complex. Not her work, not our home, not anywhere she normally went in the evenings. I remember blinking at the screen a few times, wondering if I tapped the wrong menu. But no, the pin was right there, blue, unmoving. A strange little knot formed somewhere under my ribs. Not pain, not panic, just a question mark that didn't have a place to sit. After a few minutes of circling our apartment, I decided to take a walk. I told myself it wasn't to check on her car. It was just to clear my head. A coincidence. A silly GPS glitch. Devices mess up all the time. My walk naturally curved right toward the business district. And sure enough, when I got close enough to see the parking row the app pointed me to, I recognized the car immediately. Not hers. Same model, same color, same tinted back window. But the license plate belonged to our neighbor from across the courtyard. I'd seen him washing it a dozen times. That should have made me laugh, maybe even feel relieved. But instead, the knot inside me just loosened a bit, then settled somewhere lower, like it was adjusting itself for a long stay. I didn't ask her anything when she came home later that night. There was nothing to ask. The evidence seemed clear. The GPS app had mistaken someone else's car for hers. It happens. It happened again a couple of days later. Same place, same neighbor's car, and I brushed it off for a while. The first real doubt weeks passed, and the GPS never did anything weird again. The app even updated itself in the meantime, which I took as a sign that the glitch had been resolved. Life returned to its quiet, predictable rhythm. Work, dinners, occasional movie nights. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then came the second Thursday. Not the same week. No, that would have been too obvious. A different month, a different season even, but also a Thursday. And sometimes the universe has a sense of humor so dry, it could start a fire. She said she had to stay late for a project review and asked me not to wait up. I didn't. I started a movie, cooked myself a late dinner, browsed through news articles I didn't care about. And then, almost absent-mindedly, I opened the GPS app. Her car was on the move, normal, heading south, less normal. Her office was east. Our home was north. South led to residential areas neither of us had any reason to visit. I put on shoes without turning off the lights. I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I wasn't preparing to catch anything or anyone. The only thing I felt was a certainty slowly settling in, like dust on a shelf no one's cleaned in years. I think deep down I had known something was wrong long before the first incorrect GPS ping. People don't change suddenly. Marriages don't break in a day. Cracks form quietly, invisibly, underneath the surface, and eventually everything that's hidden finds its way to the light. Following her trail, I didn't drive. Driving would have made me feel like I was on some kind of mission. I walked to the end of our street, then took a taxi from a block over. I didn't want my car to be anywhere near hers. I didn't want to risk her seeing me. I didn't want to turn this into a confrontation. I just wanted to understand. When we entered the Southern District, I told the driver to drop me off near a little park with a fountain. I'd been there once years ago with coworkers. It was quiet, with narrow roads and rows of modern apartment complexes. Expensive ones. Clean, minimalistic, sterile, in a way that makes you feel like you should whisper. The GPS showed her car parked near one of those buildings. Not a business center, not the neighbor's car. Her car. This time the knot inside me didn't move. It just went still. I walked slowly, giving myself time to prepare for whatever I was going to see. I told myself it might be anything. Maybe she was meeting a friend. Maybe she'd been invited to someone's birthday. Maybe it was work-related. But even as I ran through all those possibilities, another part of me, the quiet, honest, tired Pa, kept repeating a single sentence. If this is the truth, then it was always going to happen. When I finally turned the corner, I saw her car immediately, parked neatly, habitually, like she lived there. The lights inside the lobby of the complex were bright, and through the glass doors I saw her silhouette step into the elevator. Not rushing, not nervous, like she belonged. I stayed across the street, partially hidden behind a line of trees. I didn't need to get any closer. A few minutes passed, 5, maybe 6. Then somewhere around the 8th floor, a balcony light flicked on, and a man stepped out. He looked down at the street, not searching for anything, just checking if she had arrived. And then he smiled. A small, familiar smile. The kind you give someone you're happy to see. The kind you don't fake. A moment later, the balcony door slid open, and she stepped outside. My wife, in her coat. Hair slightly messy from the wind. She didn't touch him. He didn't reach for her, but they didn't need to. You can tell when two people aren't strangers. You can tell when a line has been crossed, even if no one moves. They talk for a bit, their voices too faint to reach the street. She tucked her hand behind her ear in that nervous laugh gesture she always had in college. He leaned against the railing, easy, relaxed, like he'd been waiting for her all evening. I realized then that this wasn't some long-term affair. This wasn't something that had been going on for months behind my back. This was new, the start of something, the first real step, the first betrayal. And I was watching it happen in real time. A strange calm washed over me. Not anger, not heartbreak. Something quieter, heavier, like accepting bad weather on a day you were hoping to spend outside. You don't scream at the clouds, you just understand that the day is over. I watched them for another moment, long enough to know I'd seen everything I needed to, long enough to know that if I stepped forward, barged into the building, yelled, demanded explanations, it would change nothing. She had already made her choice. If not tonight, then another night. If not this man, then someone else. People don't suddenly break marriage vows because of a single cause. It happens slowly, then all at once. And stopping her tonight would only delay the inevitable. I left before the balcony light turned off. I didn't want to see them step back into the apartment together. I didn't want to create more scenes in my memory than the ones already burned there. I walked all the way home, 4 miles, letting the cool evening air settle my thoughts into something almost peaceful. The city felt different that night. Softer somehow. Or maybe I'd finally stopped pretending everything was fine. When I reached our street, her car wasn't there yet. She'd be home later, with a story prepared. Something casual, something polished. Something meant to keep the surface smooth. She would never mention the man, the balcony, the smile. But I wouldn't ask. Instead, I unlocked her car, quietly removed the AirTag I had slipped behind the lining weeks ago, and dropped it into my drawer at home. The GPS app was closed, the tracking history deleted. I sat in the living room for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum, feeling the weight of what I now knew settle into place. No anger, no shouting, just an ending arriving with the softness of a whisper. Some marriages crash loudly, ours ended in silence. When she finally walked through the door that night, she greeted me the same way she always did, calm, pleasant, maybe even a little too practiced. And for the first time in years, I realized that I wasn't afraid of losing her. She was already gone. Story 6. I never expected a simple gift to change the way I looked at my marriage. Not flowers, not a letter, not a confession slipped into a moment of guilt. Just a bottle of cologne. My wife handed it to me on a Thursday evening that felt ordinary in every sense. I had just come back from work, kicked off my shoes, and sat down at the kitchen table while she finished wiping the counter. She didn't announce the gift with excitement or ceremony. She didn't wait for a birthday or an anniversary. She simply reached into a drawer, pulled out a small box, and said, "I thought you might like this." Nothing more. I smiled. I thanked her. I told her it was thoughtful. And then I noticed the box. The paper edges were a little soft. The corner was slightly bent. The seal that should have wrapped around the cap was broken. Not torn cleanly, but peeled, as if it had been opened, closed, then opened again. The cap clicked the way plastic does when it's been used more than once. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to hurt her feelings by pointing out something trivial. Plenty of stores keep samples unsealed. Maybe a clerk opened it to show another customer. Those things happen. Still, the details stuck with me in an odd way. Like a tune you can't remember, but can't stop humming. I placed the bottle on the table. "Smells nice," I said. She nodded. "Good, I thought so." But she didn't seem especially interested in how it smelled on me. She didn't lean in, didn't ask me to spray it, didn't comment further. Instead, she changed the topic right away. Something about needing to thaw chicken for tomorrow. The gift felt less like a gesture and more like a task she had finally crossed off a list. Maybe I'm overthinking it, I told myself. And for a few hours, I believed that. For weeks, I had been noticing something faint in the car. A warm, sweet scent. Not floral, not feminine. A men's fragrance. Not mine. The first time I noticed it, I had assumed it belonged to one of her coworkers. She occasionally gave people rides. Someone could have used the passenger seat and left a trace of their cologne behind. Cars trapped smells, it didn't bother me. But the weird part was how persistent it was, sometimes strong, sometimes barely there, but always present in some form. I never made a connection, never saw a reason to. Life was normal. Work, home, dinners, chores, occasional arguments, the usual. We weren't perfect, but we weren't broken either, so I ignored the lingering scent because I didn't want it to mean anything. The next morning after shaving, I took the bottle from the shelf. The cap clicked the same familiar way. The broken seal brushed lightly against my thumb. I lifted the sprayer and pressed it once against my wrist. The scent spread quickly, clean, warm, sharp at first, then soft. And suddenly I wasn't in the bathroom anymore. I was in the car. The scent was identical, not similar, not close. Identical. I froze, hands suspended halfway through the air. The cologne that had been whispering through the car for weeks was now on my skin. I looked at the bottle again, unsealed, slightly used, not new. My first reaction wasn't outrage or panic. It was confusion. Why would she give me something that smelled exactly like whoever had been in the car? Why would she choose this specific fragrance? Why would the box look like it had been opened before? I rinsed my wrist, but the scent clung stubbornly. For a long minute, I just stood there, letting water run over my hands while the air filled with the warm, sweet note I could no longer ignore. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. That's never been my nature. But I also couldn't pretend I didn't recognize that smell. Over the next few days, I noticed things that had always been there, but now carried weight. When she used the car before me, the passenger seat was always adjusted slightly farther back. Not by much, just enough for someone taller than her. The seat belt on that side smelled faintly of the cologne each time I touched it. She had placed a new air freshener on the vent, a citrus one, strong and artificial. She said the car was musty lately, except it wasn't, unless she meant the scent she was trying to cover. She wiped the dashboard more often, especially on the passenger side, even when it was clean. When I offered to drive her somewhere, she hesitated a split second before agreeing. And when she left the house early one morning, claiming traffic was heavy, I checked the live map out of simple curiosity. Traffic was normal. None of these things meant anything by themselves. I told myself that every single time. But together they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. She wasn't acting guilty. She wasn't acting deceptive. She was acting careful. The turning point was small, almost meaningless. I walked into the kitchen one evening and found her quickly closing a drawer. Something about the motion, too fast, too deliberate, made me glance at her hands. She smiled at me, a little too brightly. "Just tidying," she said. I nodded. I didn't check the drawer. I didn't need to. It wasn't about what she hid. It was about how she hid. She walked past me, her hair brushing my shoulder. I smelled the faintest note of the same warm cologne again. Not on her skin, but on her clothes, as if she had leaned against someone wearing it. I stood still after she left the room, staring at the refrigerator door. That was the moment I accepted what I had been trying not to believe. The gift wasn't a gift. It was a cover. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions. Instead, I walked outside, got into the car, and sat in the driver's seat. The scent was fresh again. Not my spray from the morning, not something from last week. Fresh, as if someone had just been there recently. I closed my eyes and leaned back, feeling the quiet weight of certainty settle over me. The bottle she gave me wasn't chosen at random. It wasn't a thoughtful surprise, it was a defensive move. A way to mask a scent she couldn't fully erase. A way to make everything line up, just in case I ever noticed. If she gave me the same cologne someone else used, then any trace of it anywhere could be explained. "Oh, it's yours." Clever, careful, calculated. But she made one mistake. She gave me the bottle before she learned how to hide the small details. Before she learned how to reseal a package. Before she learned that my sense of smell was stronger than she expected. Before she realized that the truth doesn't fall apart all at once. It unravels thread by thread. I held the bottle in my hand for a long time that night. Turned it, opened it, closed it, sprayed it once into the air, watched the fine mist catch the dim light of the garage. A used bottle, a used scent, a used excuse. She didn't give it to me because she thought I would enjoy it. She gave it to me because she thought it would protect her. And in a strange, sad way, I understood her logic. She was trying to keep the world tidy, trying to keep one life from bleeding into another. Maybe she hoped it was temporary. Maybe she hoped I wouldn't notice. Maybe she hoped the scent would blend so seamlessly into our home that it would disappear into routine. She underestimated me. Not my intelligence, not my intuition, just my attention to the small things. I didn't confront her that night, or the next. I watched. I listened. I measured my own feelings before speaking words I couldn't take back. By the time I was ready, the anger had faded into something else. Something quieter, heavier, calmer. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, just clarity. The truth didn't hit me violently, it settled gently, like dust after a long, slow collapse. I finally walked back inside, placed the bottle on the hallway table, and sat alone in the living room until I heard her footsteps. When she asked if something was wrong, I didn't mention the gift. I didn't mention the scent in the car. I didn't mention the used box or the nervous glances. I simply said, "We need to talk." Because the conversation wasn't about a bottle of cologne. It wasn't even about the act itself. It was about the distance that had formed long before either of us noticed. The invisible gap she tried to fill with a scent she didn't expect me to recognize. The gift didn't expose the truth. It just made it impossible to ignore anymore. Story 7. I've always believed that most discoveries in marriage don't arrive as thunder. They come quietly. A misplaced item, a strange tone, a moment that doesn't fully add up, but not enough to confront, not enough to accuse, just enough to sit in the back of your mind, waiting. For me, everything began with a photo, a single, unremarkable-looking image that appeared where it shouldn't have been. It didn't arrive with a warning, and my wife didn't send it or mention it. It simply surfaced in our shared cloud album one evening while I was sorting pictures from a work trip. I remember the moment exactly. I was sitting at my desk, sipping cold coffee, dragging images from my phone into a travel folder. The shared album refreshed, and suddenly there it was. A picture I had never taken, never seen, never expected. At first glance, it seemed almost meaningless. It showed our living room, the lighting a little dim, the curtains partially drawn, the sofa in the center. And sitting on that sofa was my wife, her back to the camera. Her hair slightly messy, like she had just pulled it up and let it down again. She was wearing a beige tank top she usually wore on weekends. But my eyes didn't stop on her. They stopped on the hand. A man's hand resting on her shoulder, just barely within the frame, a thumb touching the fabric of her shirt. A gesture that wasn't casual, a gesture you couldn't mistake for anything else. I stared at the image for a long moment, my brain scrambling to fill the gap between what I knew and what I was seeing. There was an instinctive urge to explain it away. Maybe it was old. Maybe she took it with me and forgot. Maybe it synced from some backup. But something was off. So I tapped on the info button, and that's when the air left my lungs. XIF data, location, our apartment. Timestamp, 2 days ago. Device, an unfamiliar phone model, newer than either of ours. I sat back in my chair, suddenly aware of how loud the refrigerator sounded in the kitchen. The house was quiet otherwise. Too quiet. I couldn't move for a moment. I couldn't even swallow. 2 days ago, I had been at work. She had told me she spent the afternoon doing laundry and preparing a presentation for a client. I had no reason to doubt her. I still didn't want to doubt her. I closed the photo and opened it again, as if it would change. It didn't. The hand was still there. To understand why I didn't immediately confront her, you'd need to understand our marriage. We had been together for over 10 years. We were the stable couple in our friend group. We argued rarely, laughed often, and lived comfortably together in routines we both liked. We shared a cloud album for convenience. Groceries, notes for home repairs, photos of our dog. Nothing secretive, nothing dramatic. It wasn't a surveillance tool, it was just useful. A few weeks earlier, she upgraded her phone because her old one was lagging. I remembered helping her transfer everything. She was unusually protective of her device during the process, but I chalked it up to normal privacy. After that, she took more photos than usual. Random things. Her plants, the dog sleeping on the balcony, a sunset from the window. Or at least that's what I assumed. I didn't check her private albums. I never cared to. But now I wondered. When she came home that evening, I didn't say anything about the picture. I wanted to understand first. I wanted to see if there was an explanation, even an unlikely one. She cooked dinner like always, humming a song she probably heard at work, dropped a kiss on my cheek, talked about an annoying email thread with her manager. Everything was normal, perfectly so, which made the photo feel even more surreal. I noticed the first small thing that didn't add up when I cleared the table. There was a faint hint of cologne in the air. Not mine, not hers, something sharper. Something I had smelled before in the past weeks but ignored, thinking maybe it came from outside or from the last time guests were over. This time I recognized it immediately. It was on the man's sleeve in the photo, not visible, but somehow familiar. I didn't sleep much that night. Over the next few days, I paid attention in ways I hadn't before. The living room cushions were sometimes arranged differently. A mug I rarely used appeared rinsed in the sink. The blanket on the sofa looked folded with her style, which meant someone else had sat there and she had tried to tidy quickly. She locked her phone faster when I walked into the room. But still, nothing was definitive. Until the second photo appeared. This one surfaced in the shared cloud album for less than a minute. By the time I tapped it, it was gone. She must have deleted it instantly. But I saw enough. It was taken from a lower angle, maybe accidentally while someone put their phone down. It showed her legs and part of another person sitting close beside her. Not touching. Just close enough that you wouldn't sit like that with a friend. I didn't mention it. I didn't ask her anything. Instead, I returned to the first photo and stared at it again, letting the reality sink in slowly. I hadn't wanted proof, but I was getting it anyway. The turning point came one evening while she was showering. Her phone was charging on the console table. I wasn't trying to snoop. I wasn't touching the device. But when the screen lit up, I noticed a notification appear. Upload complete. One new item added to shared album. My blood ran cold. I opened the cloud album on my laptop. A new image was there. Fresh. Time-stamped 3 minutes ago. And this time, the truth was impossible to soften. The photo was taken in our hallway mirror. She was standing with her back toward the camera, adjusting her hair. And behind her, reflected in the mirror, was a man, his arm around her waist, his face turned away, but his presence unmistakable. There was no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation, no shadows or tricks of light. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. The arm, the posture, the distance between them, all of it told the same story. Not an accident, not an old picture, not a misunderstanding. I sat on the couch and waited. She came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, drying her hair, humming lightly. The same little melodic habit that always made me smile before, but now it sounded far away. She entered the living room, and I slowly turned the laptop toward her. She froze mid-step, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Her face drained of its usual warmth. I didn't ask anything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even feel anger. At least not right then. Just a strange, calm clarity, like walking into a room you've been inside before in a dream. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. There was no stumbling explanation, no defensive tone, no fib out of panic, just silence. A silence so deep it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. I closed the laptop gently, not slamming it, not dramatizing it, just closing the last piece of evidence I needed. I stood up. She flinched slightly as if expecting something loud, something explosive. But the truth didn't make me explosive. It made me detached. I told her we would talk tomorrow, that I needed air, that I needed space, that I needed to understand what this meant for me, not for us. She whispered my name once, as if that was enough to rewind time. It wasn't. I walked out of the apartment, down the hallway, down the stairs, out into the evening air that suddenly felt too cold for spring. I walked without destination, just moving, letting my mind catch up with everything it had ignored, dismissed, rationalized. The images from the cloud replayed themselves on a loop. Her back, the hand, the reflection, the arm around her waist. I realized that betrayal doesn't have a voice. It doesn't knock loudly on the door. It uploads itself quietly when you least expect it. When I returned hours later, she was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red, still unable to speak. There was nothing to say. I had all the answers I needed, and they came from the place I trusted most, our shared cloud. Story 8. I've never been someone who pays much attention to flowers. I buy them on anniversaries, sometimes on her birthday, sometimes when I feel we've drifted too far apart and I want to pull us back into something warm and familiar. But I've never been the type to send extravagant bouquets for no reason. It's just not in my nature. I've always believed affection is shown through quiet things, remembering her favorite tea, fixing the loose cabinet door before she asked, warming up her car in winter. Flowers for me were symbols, not declarations, which is why, on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, when I heard a knock on the door and saw a courier holding the largest bouquet I had ever seen, my first thought wasn't jealousy. It was confusion. Slow, calm confusion. Like when you wake up in a room that looks like yours but somehow isn't. The day had been unremarkable in every possible way. A morning coffee that tasted slightly burnt, a long spreadsheet at work, the kind of mild weather that makes time feel suspended. Nothing about it set the stage for surprises. I opened the door. The courier said my wife's name, clearly, confidently, the way someone pronounces a name they've said out loud before, not something they're reading off a screen for the first time. I nodded out of habit, and he placed the bouquet in my hands. The bouquet wasn't just flowers. It was a statement. Rich, heavy roses, the color of aged Bordeaux wine, lilies that opened like quiet sighs, small white blossoms I couldn't identify that smelled faintly of citrus. The stems were wrapped in dark paper tied with a ribbon that looked almost too elegant for a simple delivery. The arrangement wasn't cheap. It was crafted, intentional, deliberate, designed to impress someone deeply. Attached to it was a small cream-colored card. On the front, a stylized monogram. 2 initials, not mine, not hers. The handwriting inside was short, almost shy. For you, you understand why. That was it, not enough to accuse anyone of anything, but enough to make something sharpen inside my chest. I placed the bouquet gently on the kitchen counter and looked at the clock. She would be home in an hour. I had time to think, to observe, to remember. The house felt too quiet suddenly, like the walls were listening. Even the ticking of the clock seemed louder, each second stretching itself out as if it wanted to be noticed. The last few weeks had carried a quiet, subtle change. Not dramatic, not even suspicious in the usual sense, but just enough that I had noticed and then, as people in long relationships often do, convinced myself to ignore. She had been lighter somehow, brighter, more careful with her phone, not hiding it, just angling it away without thinking. She spent more time choosing outfits, even for small errands. She smiled at messages but never shared what they were about. She lingered in front of the mirror longer, adjusting tiny details she used to overlook. And most telling, she had begun to use a new cologne, one I didn't recognize. She said it was from a friend at work, a sample, nothing special, but fragrance has a way of lingering, and I'm not sure hers was ever entirely hers. Still, none of this explained a bouquet this grand. None of it explained the initials. None of it explained the strange, intimate message written with such certainty. I read it again, and again. The front door opened exactly at 5:42. She walked in with her usual tired smile, shaking off her coat, kicking off her shoes. She looked at me first, then at the bouquet. Her expression didn't fall, or freeze, or panic. Instead, her eyebrows rose just slightly as if she'd walked into an unexpected performance she didn't remember auditioning for. "What's this?" she asked. "A delivery," I said. "For you." She walked closer, her eyes scanning the arrangement. She touched one of the roses, her fingers brushing over the velvety petals with a softness that felt too practiced, too familiar. Then she looked at the card, and something flickered across her face. Not guilt exactly, not fear, but recognition. A tiny muscle in her cheek twitched. It was enough. It must be a mistake, she said. Probably one of those marketing things. Or wrong address. Her explanation was too quick, too eager, the kind of answer someone gives before understanding the question. Maybe, I said, though the courier said your full name. She shrugged, but the movement was tight, stiff at the shoulders. You know how these companies are. Probably some automated list. There was a moment of silence between us, a quiet, heavy kind of silence. She picked up the bouquet, carried it to the trash bin as if intending to throw it away entirely, then hesitated and placed it on the counter instead. Her movements were hurried, restless, not natural. Don't let it bother you, she said. Really, it's nothing. But the more she insisted, the more I felt something shifting inside me. Not anger, not yet, just understanding. Later that evening, around 8, there was another knock on the door. She was in the shower. The sound of water masked my steps as I opened it. It was the same courier. He exhaled, shoulders dropping with relief, as if he'd been thinking about this all evening. Sir, sorry to bother you again. I realized I gave you the wrong card earlier. The sender contacted us asking if the correct delivery was confirmed. I wanted to double-check the recipient name. He held a small handheld device, the kind couriers use to scan and log deliveries, the screen glowing bluish in the hallway light. Could I see the bouquet again? He asked. I brought it to him, and he scanned the barcode attached to the wrapping. A screen popped up with the delivery details. Recipient. A name. A name that wasn't her legal name. Not even close. It was something intimate, soft, a private nickname I had never called her. A name with a tone of ownership, familiarity, comfort. The kind someone uses only in moments flanked by closeness. I stared at it for several seconds. Is that the signature she used? I asked quietly. The courier nodded. Yes, that's what the sender submitted as her preferred recipient name. He said she'd recognize it. There it was, the final weight that tipped the balance. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't spam. This wasn't a mix-up in the system. This bouquet was meant for her in a way that was unmistakably personal. Did she ever sign anything under this name? I murmured, more to myself than to him. The courier frowned politely. It's what was given to us. We just follow instructions. He apologized again and left. I closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, listening to the water running in the bathroom, hearing the faint echo of her humming, unaware that the truth had just walked up to our doorstep with perfect clarity. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, hair dripping, she saw me standing there with the device still in my hand, the screen glowing with her secret nickname. Her humming stopped. Her eyes widened, not in innocence, but in understanding that the moment she feared had arrived. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask questions. Questions are for people who still hope the answers might mend something. I simply turned the screen toward her. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The silence between us lasted longer than any argument could have. Finally, she whispered, I can explain. But we both knew explanations aren't meant for people who have already chosen which parts of themselves to share and which parts to hide. I walked to the kitchen, sat down, and looked at the bouquet again. It was beautiful, too beautiful for what it represented. Flowers bloom fast, but they also fade fast. By morning, the petals still looked perfect, but something in the room had wilted beyond repair. I didn't tell her to leave. I didn't pack my bags either. Some endings don't require motion, just realization. And realization had already delivered itself. In a bouquet with a name that wasn't mine to say, but was hers to answer to. Story 9. It started like any other Sunday evening. I was sprawled on the couch, laptop warming my thighs, idly checking my email and social media. Work had been grating all week, and the quiet hum of the apartment felt comforting. My wife was in the kitchen, humming softly while rinsing dishes, the scent of lemon soap lingering in the air. The ordinary calm of the evening made it the perfect moment for distraction. I clicked through my usual accounts. Nothing out of place. Then on a whim, I typed her name into the search bar one last time. I had done this countless times before, just to make sure she hadn't posted something I'd missed, to scroll past vacation photos she knew I didn't care for, but couldn't resist peeking at. Today, though, something different popped up. A second account. Not one I had ever seen before. No friend connections, no tagged photos on my feed, nothing that indicated I should know it existed. The profile picture was a subtle, cropped image of her from a conference last year, the one she had posted to her public account. But even that was filtered in a way that almost hid her entirely. The handle was a mix of her initials and a number, generic enough to be innocent. But the fact it existed at all made my chest tighten ever so slightly. Curiosity, that quiet, insistent thing, pushed me to click. The first post loaded slowly. A photo of a hotel lobby, sunlight spilling across polished floors. She had written a short caption about a conference she attended last month. Nothing remarkable, nothing that raised alarms. Another photo followed, a snapshot of a cafe where she had stopped for coffee on a business trip. Another, a conference room with neatly arranged chairs. Even the captions seemed neutral, almost mundane. My first reaction was relief. There was nothing scandalous here. Just professional life, the parts of her I thought I knew. Then I scrolled down a little further. The comments began. At first they were normal. Generic congratulations, looks great, or nice view. But then one comment caught my attention. Familiar, not in the sense that I knew the person, but in tone. Playful, almost personal. Careful, don't let the hotel staff see how much fun you're having. I frowned. That wasn't strange in itself. Plenty of colleagues joke around, but something in the phrasing felt intimate. The emoji, the teasing, it didn't feel professional. I scrolled more, and the same user appeared again. Another post, a photo of her walking past a street mural during a work trip. Comment, nice shoes. Bet they're making all the locals jealous, wink wink. I blinked. Shoes? Locals? How would this person even know the shoes she was wearing unless they were paying attention to details only someone close would notice? The more I scrolled, the more frequent the comments became. Always the same person. Not too many words, just enough to suggest familiarity. Inside jokes, observations that only someone who knew her routines or moods might make. I felt a quiet tightening in my chest. Something in me whispered caution. Curiosity was one thing, realization another. I kept scrolling, though, because the pattern was impossible to ignore. Photos from hotels, from conference rooms, even snapshots of the city from her window. And there he was, always there. Comments like, missing the morning coffee yet? Or did they finally serve that flat white you like? Careful, you might turn into a city tour guide with all these wanderings. Small, casual, yet intimate. Never overtly flirtatious, never sexual, but each one landed with a weight I couldn't shake. It wasn't meant for me. Not entirely. I tried to rationalize. Perhaps it was a close friend from work, a colleague from the conference, maybe a mentor with a sense of humor. I told myself these things. I wanted to believe them, but every comment had a tone of private knowledge, a familiarity she didn't exhibit in our conversations. I noticed patterns, references to hotels I didn't recognize, comments about flights she'd booked that I hadn't known of, even hints about her mood that she had never discussed with me, little remarks like, looks like someone had a long meeting today, or bet that presentation left you exhausted. It was subtle, almost too subtle to pin down, but enough that my mind began to fill in the gaps. I remembered last month, a Friday evening, she had seemed unusually cheerful after returning from work. She had brushed off my question about her day with a tired smile, insisting it had been a normal day. But now I realized she had likely been texting him or exchanging messages somewhere I wasn't meant to see. Another evening, she had gone out for a work dinner, 2 hours longer than she said. I hadn't questioned it then. I had trusted her, as I always had. But now the picture became clearer. I sat back in the chair and let out a slow breath. I didn't feel anger at first. Not yet, just a quiet understanding. The kind that comes from realizing the foundation of familiarity has quietly shifted. The apartment felt unusually quiet. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant sounds of cars passing on the street, the faint smell of leftover coffee in the mug beside me. All of it became amplified, weighted. I imagined the comment notifications popping up while she was away, small digital nudges of a connection I wasn't part of. The idea of her reading them, smiling silently at something I wasn't meant to see, twisted something inside me. She emerged minutes later, toweling her hair, humming softly again. I didn't mention the account. I didn't raise my voice. I simply kept watching, observing the way she moved, the way she smiled at nothing in particular, the casual elegance with which she carried herself. I realized then that the betrayal, if it could even be called that, wasn't obvious in grand gestures. It was quiet, insistent, hidden, a digital echo in comments, a name I didn't know, a connection I had never anticipated. I left the laptop open on the table, the account still visible, the comments still scrolling like a soft whisper of truth. Sometimes, realization doesn't need confrontation. Sometimes it's enough to see the pattern, to understand the weight of what exists beyond what is said aloud. She glanced at the screen briefly, eyes flicking just slightly. She didn't recognize the account, or pretended not to. But I didn't need words. I didn't need explanations. I already knew enough. We sat in the quiet of the apartment, the hum of the city outside blending with the faint sound of water dripping from the shower. And I understood. Some relationships aren't broken by sudden, dramatic acts. They are reshaped by quiet absences, by private spaces, by the small ways two lives can diverge without ever raising alarms. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't storm out. I didn't ask for a confession. I simply let the knowledge settle between us like dust on the shelves. Visible if you look closely, unavoidable once you notice it, impossible to ignore. Somewhere in the scrolling feed, the same comments appeared again. Cheerful, intimate, familiar. Not cruel, not malicious, but deeply personal. Too personal for me to dismiss as harmless friendship. By morning, sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the laptop screen. The account was still open, the comments still there, quietly marking the distance between us. And I realized that some truths, once discovered, do not need to be spoken aloud. They simply exist, shaping the way you see everything else. I poured myself a coffee, watching the steam curl in the morning light, my mind tracing back to all the small moments I hadn't understood. Every laugh, every shrug, every delayed reply suddenly gained a different weight. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't even know what I wanted to happen. But I knew the distance had already begun. It had started quietly, pixel by pixel, comment by comment, in a way no conversation could undo. Story 10. I never expected the truth about my marriage to arrive in the mouth of a Labrador retriever. That might sound like the opening to a joke, or maybe the beginning of a children's book. But I assure you, nothing that followed felt lighthearted. The first time Max, the neighbor's dog, trotted into my yard with something that didn't belong to him, I saw no omen in it. He was carrying a crumpled coffee receipt, clamped delicately between his teeth like a proud trophy. I remember laughing at him. His tail wagged as though he'd just come home from war with evidence of a heroic victory. I took the receipt from him, patted his head, and threw it in the kitchen trash without a second thought. It wasn't until much later that I realized that tiny slip of paper had marked the beginning of an unraveling, one tug that loosened the entire thread of my marriage. But before I get ahead of myself, I should explain a few things. My name doesn't matter for this story. Neither does the exact location of the neighborhood I lived in or the street's name. What matters is that it was a quiet suburb, the kind of place where people waved from their driveways, but rarely invited each other over. My wife Anna and I had lived there for 7 years when everything happened. Our home wasn't remarkable. Red shutters, a neat lawn, a few rose bushes she insisted on trimming herself. It was peaceful, predictable, or so I thought. The people next door, the Collins family, had a dog named Max. He was an overly friendly golden Labrador with an unfortunate habit of assuming everyone wanted to play fetch, even if they hadn't agreed to, even if they hadn't thrown anything in the first place. Max would wander into our yard often, dropping sticks, tennis balls, half-chewed squeaky toys, whatever he managed to drag along. I never minded. I worked from home as an editor, and Max's visits were sometimes the most exciting part of my afternoon. But on a Tuesday morning in early spring, he brought me something new, a coffee shop receipt with my wife's name on it. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Maybe it had blown into the yard from the trash. Maybe it stuck to the bottom of her shoe the day before. Anna liked coffee shops more than I did. She went often. Nothing about the situation seemed strange. The second item Max brought a week later seemed slightly odder. It was a house key. It didn't fit any of our locks. And the keychain, bright red, shaped like a heart, didn't look familiar. When I asked Anna about it, she shrugged. Probably an old key from one of the previous owners, she said. Or maybe Max stole it out of someone's bag. That dog picks up anything shiny. She tossed the key into the junk drawer, kissed me on the cheek, and left for a yoga class. I remember staring into the drawer afterward. The key lay there with its red heart, out of place among rubber bands and dried-up pens. I didn't suspect anything at that point, only felt that tickle of mild curiosity you experience when something doesn't quite line up, but isn't important enough to pursue. If the story ended there, with a stray receipt and a misplaced key, I'd probably still be sitting on the back porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunlight hit Anna's roses. But stories, unfortunately, rarely end in their most peaceful moments. They end where the truth insists they must. The third item Max delivered came on an unusually warm Friday afternoon. He bounded into the yard carrying a torn corner of a photograph. I only picked it up because I recognized the handwriting on the back. Anna's looping cursive, unmistakable. I turned the scrap of photo over. Only a man's shoulder was visible, a white dress shirt, a bit of a blazer, nothing else. The rest had been ripped away. That was when the first real suspicion, the kind you feel in your gut, not your mind, stirred. The three items together formed something like a constellation, not enough to name a shape or story, but enough to notice the stars existed. Still, I didn't accuse Anna. I've never been the kind of man to leap toward conclusions. Maybe that's a flaw. Maybe it's a virtue. Depends who you ask, I suppose. Instead, I watched. Quietly, carefully, patiently. Anna was a teacher, English literature at the local high school. She had always been dedicated, often staying late to grade papers or help students with college essays. I never doubted her. We met in our 20s, married by 30, settled into the comfortable rhythm of life together. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't impulsive. She was steady, warm, and reliable, which is why the oddities began to feel heavier than they should. On Monday evenings, she started taking walks to clear her head. On Thursdays, she came home smelling like a brand of cologne I didn't own. On Sundays, she said she needed me time, which was reasonable, but her returns grew later and later. It wasn't dramatic enough to confront, not yet, and I still didn't want to believe anything had changed. But Max did. Maybe. One afternoon, I decided to see where Max went when he wandered into our yard. As soon as Anna left for an errand, he appeared at the fence, sniffed around impatiently, then dashed through a gap he must have used countless times unnoticed. I followed him discreetly, feeling faintly ridiculous. Following a dog. What was I expecting to find? A secret door, a buried suitcase, a confession. Max trotted on purposefully, tail high, nose to the ground, into a narrow strip behind the Collins' shed. He sniffed a particular spot and pawed at the soil. When he ran off again, I crouched to see what he'd found. A scarf, a takeout bag for two, a note half crumpled and half buried. Sorry for earlier. Talk tonight? M. My name doesn't start with M. My breathing stayed calm, controlled, though the world around me felt strangely silent. I washed the dirt off the items, placed them on the kitchen table, and stared. Sometimes the ground beneath you doesn't collapse, but it shifts, enough to warn that the landscape has changed irreversibly. I waited for Anna to come home. She did, cheerful, humming lightly. I said nothing, not ready yet, not because I feared her answer, but because I feared my own reaction. I had promised myself I wouldn't let anger guide me. The betrayal revealed itself calmly 2 days later. Max bounded toward a man kneeling to scratch his ears. From the back porch, I watched silently. The man froze when he saw me. Ordinary dark brown hair, early 40s, business casual attire, eyes wide with shock. I take it you're Anna's husband, he said. I nodded. I guess she didn't tell you about me. No, I said evenly. He exhaled, rubbed his neck. I just needed to see her. One last time. What's your name? I asked. Michael. She used to call me M. My eyes flicked to the note on the table. How long? I asked calmly. A few months. We met at that cafe near the school, the one with the green umbrellas. Did she tell you she's ending things? He asked softly. No, I said. Well, she did. A week ago. That's why you found those items. I left them near the fence so Max would bring them to you. You used the dog? I said. I know it sounds terrible. I didn't want to hurt you, but she kept saying she'd tell you herself. Max nudged my hand for attention. I stroked his ears. You should talk to her, Michael said. Whatever you decide is your choice. He turned and left, Max following briefly before returning to me. When Anna came home that night, she chatted lightly, asked about dinner. Only then did I say, I spoke to someone today. Who? Michael. Her smile faded, breath caught. I told her everything plainly. She apologized, explained, tried to give context, but no explanation makes betrayal acceptable. I listened. When she finished, I nodded. The scarf, note, and takeout bag remained on the table, evidence of a truth delivered gently, silently. Betrayal doesn't always explode. Sometimes it arrives quietly, leaving stillness. We separated a few months later, not violently but gently, like drifting branches. Sometimes I sit on that porch. Max runs to me, tail wagging. Maybe he misses me more than they do. He never lied. He delivered the truth, piece by piece, tail wagging, waiting for me to notice. Eventually I did, but not before Max showed me, quite literally, that he knew too much. Dear subscribers, if you have a story you believe is worth sharing, feel free to send it to us by email, storytimelounge320@gmail.com. We'll be happy to take a look, and it just might become the story featured in our next video.